Gary, would you say that Facebook is one of the most important social networks out there? It's the one to, if people are going to choose and try to, not use all these different products and kind of put themselves down, like, do you
in
think
which context? I mean, obviously
when you look at sheer numbers of people on the network.
From a business standpoint or from a personal standpoint?
Let's go with both. Let's go.
Well, I think from a personal standpoint, that ship has sailed, right? I mean, that's the social network people are on. Great Aunt Sue, at her 72 years old, is rocking, Facebook and finding like her, sweetheart from when she was 5 years old and flying to Oklahoma to like high five him, right?
She needs to calm down on the keg stand photos.
I agree. It's not even keg stand photos. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that from a business standpoint, I think Facebook pages are very interesting. I think Twitter is a great platform. It's quick. It's got a lot of value. But what Facebook pages allows, and under the VaynerMedia umbrella that I live with my brother, and we do a lot of consulting and strategy for brands. It has a lot of flexibility. I mean, you could build a website on top of a Facebook page. I firmly believe that customers are more comfortable with a Facebook URL. So if you are a Pepsi or a Ford or the National Hockey League, when you're running a commercial or using traditional media and layering social on top of it, Facebook.com/NHL is something consumers are a little bit more comfortable to go to. Plus, you can do a lot of things on that platform to interact their social graph. So I would say that Facebook pages, in a lot of ways, for businesses is the most necessity-driven page, because you can actually do a lot of things. You can code on top of it, and so I think it's a necessity. I think that Facebook, in a lot of ways, it's tough to say they've won, right? Because if this was years ago and we were sitting here talking about AOL, I would have been like, AOL won, right? And so I think you got to be careful about those things. On the flip side, nobody's ever really. I had a bunch of friends when the whole privacy thing broke tell me that they were going to quit Facebook. They're like, Gary, you're into that stuff, right? They were kind of telling me, these are like normal friends outside baseball, right? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, I got to tell you something, because maybe you can make one of those silly videos. I went to go quit Facebook, and on the last page, it showed a picture of like my wife and my best friend and my uncle, and they said, see ya, we're sad you're leaving, but oh, by the way, before you leave, before you hit that last button and you're leaving Facebook, we just want you to know that Grandma Ann and your best friend John and your wife Sally are gonna miss you.
Yeah, like they photoshopped a tear on there.
Yeah. And they couldn't. Two separate friends who don't know each other because of the whole privacy thing 6 months ago both let me know that they did not quit Facebook. And once you map that social graph, there's a lot of interesting things that go on. So I think they're a beast.
Yeah.
What, I mean, do you think that it's getting to a point where there's kind of what Gary said, there's so much noise that it's tough to map that social graph a bit?
Well, I think it's strange that, like, Facebook has managed to very cleverly become synonymous with your actual friends. Like that whole "we're going to miss you." It's like, no, you're not. You're sitting right here, and it's like, no, on this screen we're going to miss you. It's so messed up, and I think there is actually a strange difference, and it's sort of generational as well, where people like Gary and I, who sort of came into the internet before Facebook, see, you mentioned like catching up with old friends and like all this idea. People who are coming into Facebook now never had the idea of ever losing touch with old friends. Like, to them, it is synonymous with their social graph. And in fact, there are a lot of friends who they've never met. And that's what to me is slightly strange about Facebook, and is potentially really interesting, but potentially really damaging to social relationships, is this idea that, oh, because I've like poked them on Facebook this week, I've had my interaction quota with them. And you never lose touch with anyone, that's great. But actually, as someone who did use Facebook to find a bunch of old friends, I suddenly didn't actually have that much in common with most of them, like having not seen them since school. But on Facebook, it almost doesn't matter. As long as they're there, and as long as their picture pops up every so often and I click or see a picture of them, I feel like, oh, I know them. And I worry that we're going to end up with fewer real, meaningful relationships. And I mean, I don't know. 20 years from now, we might have just all adjusted and it might be fine. But it is a bit worrying when your only interaction with somebody is that little picture. So that the idea of missing that avatar is enough to make you stay on something.
I think the flip side is, I don't think we ever had that many meaningful, I don't see how in any way Facebook is going to shrink meaningful relationships. I think we lived with a pretty small number of meaningful relationships. I mean, there's Dunbar numbers and things of that nature, I get that. But I think when you really look, I do something very funny. When I fly, I like to fly with, I switch seats sometimes and sit with very old people. I feel like they've played the game, and I like to like suck, that knowledge out of them. I think I'm just an old soul. I think people have very small graphs. I think life is kind of pretty basic, and I think the one thing for me, and listen, this comes down to DNA, because I'm very different than, let's say, my dad, right? Very different. We're polar opposites. So I get a good sense of like the other side. I like people, and I like to me, a poke is such baloney, and I'm with you. On the flip side, I feel like that's a human being that I might have had 00, Robert Parrish-like interaction with my whole life. And so maybe just that little something means something. To me, when I open the door for somebody and they, in the city and they walk through, if they turn back and give me a smile instead of just walking through, that changes the whole complexity of like the way I feel. And I just wonder if that's what's being replicated. And some way, I'll be honest with you, I think this stuff is making it more scalable, not less scalable as a lot of people think.
I actually agree with you, except my concern is that and I don't think it's about having more friends. I think the trouble is, does it dilute the interactions you have with those who would be your core friends? And do you get to the point where, because you have 10,000 people and because you're on Facebook all day, you feel like with the charity thing, you feel like, oh, I've done my bit for socializing today. And actually you haven't spoken to another living soul apart from opening the door for them.
I think what's really neat about our generation is I've been able to live life enough with and without this stuff that it's interesting. For all the social, everybody knows me as like, I'm social dude. I was insanely not social. I was very focused on building my career. I didn't go out with my good friends. I was hustling. It blows my mind how much more social I really am now because of things like Google Calendar and things that can actually manage relationships, like somebody hitting me up on my wall a couple times. Squeaky wheel gets, the grease kind of thing. I'm dramatically more social because of it, and I think it has an impact.